For Police Chief Mark Delaney, the quiet suburban neighborhood of Maplewood Grove seemed like a fresh beginning. After years of serving on the city's police force, witnessing crime, chaos, and heartbreak, he wanted nothing more than to give his young daughter, Lily, a safe and peaceful life. At only 10 years old, Lily had already faced more than most adults ever would. Born with a congenital heart defect, she had undergone 2 major surgeries and lived with a fragile heart that made every day precious. Mark's late wife, Emily, had passed away just 2 years earlier from an unexpected illness, leaving behind a void that neither time nor duty could fill. Raising Lily alone had become his greatest challenge and his proudest mission. Every morning before heading to the precinct, he checked Lily's oxygen monitor, prepared her medication, and made sure she had everything she needed for her homeschooling lessons. Despite her condition, Lily was a bright, cheerful child. She loved painting, reading mystery books, and spending afternoons on their front porch surrounded by flowers her father planted in Emily's memory. Their home was modest but full of warmth. Mark had chosen a corner house with wide sidewalks and a front ramp so Lily could safely move around with her portable oxygen tank. To him, it wasn't just a house, it was a promise of stability and hope. The neighbors seemed friendly enough when they first moved in, offering pies, handshakes, and polite smiles. Among them was Karen Holloway, the neighborhood's self-appointed enforcer of rules and president of the HOA. With her neatly trimmed hedges, clipboard in hand, and a reputation for keeping order, she seemed harmless at first, just another meticulous neighbor. But even during their first week, Mark noticed Karen's lingering glances at their porch ramp and medical equipment. She made small, cutting comments like, our HOA has very specific guidelines about exterior modifications, or we try to maintain a certain image here. Mark brushed it off with patience. Years on the force had taught him how to handle people who liked control. Still, there was something unsettling about the way she said image, as if compassion were an inconvenience. For Mark, Maplewood Grove symbolized peace. For Karen Holloway, it was perfection, and anyone who didn't fit that vision, even a sick child, was a problem to be fixed. Neither of them knew that this small clash of values would soon erupt into an unthinkable act that would change both of their lives forever. In the weeks that followed, Mark tried to blend into Maplewood Grove's quiet rhythm. He worked long hours at the precinct but always returned home in time for dinner with Lily. Their evenings were simple: a home-cooked meal, a short walk around the block, and Lily's laughter echoing softly through the house. But that peace began to crumble, piece by piece, under the watchful eyes of Karen Holloway. Karen had lived in the neighborhood for over a decade and treated her role as HOA president like a full-time job. She monitored lawns, sent warning letters for minor infractions, and often stood outside with her tablet, documenting what she called community violations. When she first sent Mark a formal notice about Lily's medical ramp, it was almost laughable: a printed form claiming the ramp violated aesthetic standards and needed to be removed or modified to align with community guidelines. Mark read the letter twice, barely believing the pettiness of it. He calmly wrote back, explaining that the ramp was a medical necessity, approved under state and federal accessibility laws. He even attached a note from Lily's cardiologist confirming her mobility limitations. Karen's response came swiftly: a cold, handwritten note slipped into their mailbox: medical or not, rules are rules. From then on, she seemed to watch them constantly. When Lily's oxygen delivery truck parked for a few minutes too long, Karen took photos. When Mark forgot to roll the garbage bins in by the 7 p.m. deadline, another violation notice arrived. Once, she even told Lily not to play with her medical wires on the porch, mistaking the child's oxygen tubing for clutter. The neighbors began whispering about Karen's obsession, but few dared to confront her. She had a way of making people uncomfortable, armed with the HOA rulebook like a weapon. Mark tried to stay calm. He knew how authority could be abused, and he didn't want to stoop to her level. Still, each incident chipped away at his patience. Lily, ever innocent, didn't fully understand why Mrs. Holloway disliked them. She only knew that her father became quieter each time another notice appeared. One evening, as Mark tucked her into bed, she whispered, "Daddy, did we do something wrong?" Mark's heart tightened. "No, sweetheart," he said softly. "Some people just forget how to be kind." He had no idea that Karen's cruelty was about to reach a level that would test every bit of restraint he had learned in 20 years of law enforcement. It was a blistering summer afternoon when everything spiraled out of control. The air was thick, the sun merciless, and even the neighborhood's usual hum of sprinklers and distant lawnmowers felt unusually tense. Mark had been called into the precinct unexpectedly, a traffic collision involving multiple injuries, and although he hated leaving Lily home alone, her home nurse was delayed, and she insisted she would be fine waiting on the porch. "Don't worry, Daddy," Lily said, smiling faintly as she adjusted the strap of her portable oxygen tank. "I'll just read my book and stay right here." He kissed her forehead and double-checked her monitor before driving off. He'd be gone only an hour, maybe less. But sometimes, an hour is all it takes for the unthinkable to happen. From her window across the street, Karen Holloway noticed Lily sitting on the porch. To anyone else, it was a peaceful sight, a quiet child reading under the shade of an umbrella. But to Karen, it was an offense. She had been stewing over Mark's defiance for weeks, convinced that his refusal to comply threatened the order she worked so hard to maintain. Fueled by self-righteous anger, Karen marched across the street, clipboard in hand, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Young lady," she snapped, startling Lily. "You can't just sit out here with all this equipment cluttering the porch. This is not a hospital." Lily blinked in confusion, her small hands trembling. I'm just reading, ma'am. My dad said I could." But Karen didn't listen. Her gaze darted to the porch gate, which Mark had installed for safety. She yanked a metal chain from her gardening tools, the same one she used to lock her garbage bins, and looped it tightly around the gate, securing it with a padlock. "There," she said sharply. "Now you'll stay put. Maybe this will teach your father to respect community rules." Lily's face went pale. Her chest began to rise unevenly as panic set in. She tugged at the chain, but her heart monitor beeped erratically. Her oxygen tube caught on the railing. She called for help, but no one heard. By the time Mark's patrol car turned onto the street 40 minutes later, something inside him told him something was wrong. When he saw his daughter chained to the porch, tears streaking down her face, his world froze. He didn't see Karen's rules. He didn't see her authority. He only saw his child, terrified, gasping, and trapped. And in that instant, the police chief and him vanished. Only a father remained, a father whose patience had just run out. Mark's heart stopped for a second as he leapt out of his patrol car. The sound of Lily's strained breathing hit him before he even reached the porch. Her face was pale, lips trembling, eyes wide with fear. The metal chain glinted under the sunlight, heavy, locked, cruel. He tore at it with his bare hands first, then ripped the padlock free with the steel cutters he kept in his trunk. Lily's oxygen tank had tipped over, the tubing tangled in the railing. "It's okay, baby. I've got you," he whispered, steadying his shaking hands as he reattached her oxygen line. The monitor steadied, faint but stable. Only then did he look up and see Karen Holloway standing at the edge of her driveway, arms crossed, expression smug. "I told you that ramp violated community policy," she said sharply. "If you'd just listened." Mark's voice came out low and dangerous. "You chained a child to a porch." Karen scoffed, unbothered. "Don't exaggerate. I was making sure she didn't wander off while you were neglecting her. Frankly, chief or not, you should thank me for keeping your daughter safe." But the mention of chief didn't come from her. It came from Officer Ramirez, who had just pulled up in response to Mark's urgent radio call. 2 squad cars arrived behind him, lights flashing. Neighbors began to gather, whispering as they watched the scene unfold. Karen blinked in confusion as the officers approached her. "Wait, what's going on?" she demanded. Mark straightened, his badge now gleaming on his chest. "What's going on," he said coldly, "is that you unlawfully restrained a minor, my daughter, causing her medical distress." Her confidence faltered. "You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president." Officer Ramirez exchanged a look with Mark, barely hiding his disbelief. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "you're under arrest for unlawful restraint and child endangerment." Karen's voice rose to a shrill pitch as the handcuffs clicked. "You can't do this. I was enforcing neighborhood standards. The HOA has authority." Mark's expression didn't change. "The HOA doesn't outrank the law. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Karen was led to the patrol car, her protests echoing down the street. Lily, still weak but safe, clung to her father's arm. As the car door shut, Mark took a slow breath, his eyes never leaving the woman who had terrorized his child. For the first time since moving there, Maplewood Grove felt quiet again, not peaceful yet, but finally free of the poison that had festered behind perfect lawns and painted smiles. In the days that followed, the Delaney home became the quiet center of a neighborhood reckoning. Word of the incident spread quickly, first whispered across backyards, then printed in the local paper under the headline, HOA president arrested for child endangerment, victim is police chief's daughter. Neighbors who once turned a blind eye to Karen's bullying now stood at Mark's doorstep, shaken and apologetic. Some brought flowers, others offered help, and a few simply said, "We should have spoken up sooner." The same streets that once felt watchful and judgmental were now filled with genuine empathy. For the first time, Maplewood Grove began to look like the community Mark had hoped for when he moved in. Lily was slow to recover, both physically and emotionally. Her heart monitor readings had returned to normal, but fear lingered in her eyes whenever she glanced at the porch. Mark quietly removed the old chain and gate and replaced them with a new ramp painted sky blue and decorated with bright sunflowers that Lily helped him stencil. It wasn't just an accessibility ramp anymore, it was a symbol of her safety and strength. Meanwhile, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. For years, Karen had ruled through intimidation, citing bylaws, threatening fines, and enforcing standards that benefited no one but her own sense of control. But this time, the community voted unanimously to remove her from the presidency and permanently ban her from serving in any leadership role again. The same people who once feared her now stood united against everything she represented. For Mark, justice had never been about revenge, it was about accountability and compassion. He made sure Karen faced full legal consequences, but he also used the ordeal to push for change. Within weeks, he worked with the city council to introduce Lily's Law, ensuring that no HOA in the county could ever restrict or penalize medical accessibility equipment again. Late one evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Mark sat beside Lily on the newly painted porch. She leaned against his shoulder, her oxygen tank quietly humming beside her. "Daddy," she said softly, "are we safe now?" He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Yes, sweetheart. We're safe. And because of you, other families will be safe too." The neighborhood was peaceful again, not the false, polished peace that Karen had enforced, but the kind born from understanding, resilience, and the courage to do what's right.